Hi, I'm Ed Coper from Populares, and I'm going to talk to you today about how Helix Personas helped change the country. So the case study that we're going to talk about, and in case you don't follow politics closely, is about something that happened in the 2022 federal election. And that was that in a bunch of inner city, very affluent, traditional Liberal Party heartland seats, a few community-backed independent candidates who were largely female, focused on climate change and integrity, all managed to take these seats off the Liberal Party. And these seats were really the key heartland. A lot of prime ministers had come from these electorates, very much blue blood, deep Liberal heartland. So the case study that I'll talk to you today about is how we managed to convince a lot of voters to switch their lifelong brand loyalty from the Liberal Party to support a teal candidate. And as you can see on the slide there, the Macquarie Dictionary in fact had teal as the word of the year, because that's now become the collective term and the brand that we know these candidates from. So first of all, just a little bit about what a political campaign is usually like. And if you're a marketer in the commercial space, you might see that the status quo around a political campaign is a little bit behind the curve for what you'd expect to see in a large-scale marketing and advertising campaign these days. So the usual political campaign has a few features. It really focuses on above the line spend and content, and then we'll push that below the line as an afterthought. It's more spray and pray, counting the tarps of a campaign. It focuses on demographics as its key part of as its key model of segmentation. And the message is one size fits most. So what is the lowest common denominator message that I can say to everyone and appeal to as many people as possible? It's also policy focused, and this is a big misconception in politics, that people will vote for policies that favour them, when in fact their triggers are actually much more values based. So what should a campaign do, a political campaign? It should be below the line, it should be laser targeted in terms of its message. It should be psychographic rather than demographic, which is where the Helix pixels come in, the Helix personas come in. The message should be differentiated, so you can say the right thing to the right person. And of course, it should focus on values as the key trigger that decides how we vote. So the challenge when you are running a political campaign in a teal seat is that you usually have quite a different dynamic in a normal political campaign, where you have a group of voters and then a section of them might care about climate change, and you're trying to find your climate change message to the overlap in that Venn diagram there, and who are the voters who care about climate change. Now, the problem with the teal political campaign is that the Venn diagram between voters and people who care about climate change is just a circle. Every single voter has the same issue priorities there. And so you need a form of segmentation that goes a little bit deeper and more nuanced than the usual political campaign that will just look at which people care about which issue. So how did we solve this problem in the teal seats? Well, here you can see an image from the mapping tool where we were able to look at what are the Helix personas and how would we allocate these to different types of nuance around a message about climate change. So the example there you can see on the left, you see the mesh blocks that we identified where people might respond to a message: I believe in economic responsibility and environmental sustainability, I want a successful leader. Compared to the mesh blocks on the right, where you see I'm passionate about climate change and equality and want a leader who will act on these. So these are kind of two very nuanced messages around the same kind of theme, but we identified the Helix personas like your blue chips, your 101s, etc., that might respond to one or the other, and then we could map them. So Helix became the real solution for the depth of segmentation that we had to go through in these campaigns. It wasn't the complete picture. What we had to do was take something which is a data set that is largely built for the purpose of commercial application. What are the buying triggers? How do values relate to those sorts of consumer choices? We had to layer over that our own political insights. But it was a great data set that allowed us to do that because it thinks about values. We're able to look at that and say, if a person has those sorts of Helix values, how would we overlay that with a political worldview? How would we overlay that with political issues, which we could use our in-house experience and knowledge from politics to overlay that over Helix personas? And the other thing it had to align with, obviously, is the campaign values. So it was no good if the Helix was telling us that people might care about something that the candidate didn't and the campaign didn't. So we had to join the dots there. And as you will have noticed in these campaigns, climate, integrity, treatment of women, these are the types of issues that really came to the top. So that gave us our complete picture where we were looking for the center of that Venn diagram of messages that connected on those issues with Helix personas that we knew from our political overlay would really resonate with them. Now, the things we did with Helix would be familiar to you if you've used Helix before, and just as applicable for a political campaign as well. First of all, we needed to use them to understand what are the values, motivations, and triggers of people in these electorates. We then use it to segment, so how would we group them together into coherent segments that all might respond to the same type of message. We could append data, so political campaigns collect a lot of first-party data, and so we could combine that with other data sets and append other pieces of data like Helix to it. And then obviously we need to target. How do we find those people and how do we persuade them? And the main tactic that we did there was digital marketing and really using digital advertising to find and persuade people using this segmentation. So the first key way that we used Helix, as you can see from examples here, is around messaging. What are the things that these campaigns have to say? So you can see in a few examples here, there's a flyer from Kooyong that features Malcolm Turnbull. There's another ad from Wentworth in Sydney that is an article from the Financial Review. There's another ad with an old white guy who's voted Liberal his whole life. And then another from Mackellar where the candidate was a GP with a message of trust your local doctor. So all of these messages and all of this content was based on that psychographic profile that we knew from Helix. We knew they read the Financial Review. We knew that they would trust professions like doctors. We knew they would respond well to these types of figures that you see in these ads. And that really formed the architecture for the campaign content and messaging. The second key way we used Helix was in our segmentation and targeting. So as I mentioned, this is a really digital first approach to campaigning. And the table you can see there's a couple of seats as an example. How many digital ads each voter in these seats saw on average. So the extreme example there is Kooyong, where every voter in Kooyong saw a Monique Ryan ad an average of 252 times each. Now, a lot of people ask me when I tell them this fact, you know, how did you deal with people being really annoyed at being spammed so much by so many ads? And the short answer is they weren't annoyed at all. Because we had got the creative and the messaging right, the advertising was not intrusive. It resonated with their values and attitudes. And in fact, a lot of people would share our ads if served them on a platform like Facebook. They would share it to their own networks, which is obviously the best indication that that message and that bit of content has really hit the mark. So even at that volume over such a short period of time, the advertising was very effective because we'd nailed the messaging piece as well. And the third way we used Helix Personas was really, as you may have done so yourself, in media buying and resource allocation. Resource allocation could be a little bit different in a political campaign. You can see an image here of volunteers in t-shirts with clipboards. That is, door knocking types of organising activities. You can use Helix and Helix mapping to say, these are the doors we think you should knock, or the priority ones you should start with. And we could also use it to say, here's the script you should use when you're at that door. Use this script on these doors, this script on the other doors. And obviously for media buying, so the out-of-home efforts were really targeted and driven by Helix. You can see an example here from Wentworth. We had mobile bicycle billboards, and you could give the riders a map of which routes to take so that they could get the best areas you knew would have the right audiences. And you can see an example here. One of the pieces of creative, we know now people from all stripes, all walks of life, all sides of politics could agree that Scott Morrison was very much on the nose, and so some of the creative was just featuring the candidate with Scott Morrison. And you can see in this one, poor old Dave Sharma of Wentworth saw it riding past, flagged down the bicycle billboards, took a photo and promoted it and amplified it to his own network. So we would see that as a very successful piece of advertising where even your opponent is sharing your ads. So those are the key ways we used Helix to really drive these campaigns. And the results, you can see, were wildly successful. There were 7 successful Teal candidates in the lower house and 1 successful Senator David Pocock in the Senate in the ACT. And you can see some of the media buzz about the results there on screen, with much of it calling out the sophistication of the campaign. What they couldn't see was that below the surface there was Helix Personas were really key to driving a lot of those insights, the messaging, the segmentation targeting, and mobilisation piece as well. Thanks a lot.